want to say a few words on these local election results in Hong Kong. Great news. Um, my goodness, Hong Kong needs some good news. It seems that the pro-democracy camp has really got a strong mandate. Apparently, 17 out of 18 local district councils were won by pro-democracy parties, compared to zero the last time around. So this really is a vindication of the protest movement. And despite fears, the day itself went trouble free. That's very important because had the protesters used violence or anything, that would have, I think, damaged the cause. Um, but this should be a message to Beijing. Carrie Lam has said that she has to have a big rethink. Um, Back in 2014, Xi Jinping's regime offered a proposal where the chief executive would kind of be selected from a group of candidates. But clearly, anything Beijing proposes, unless it is pro democracy, isn't going to be sufficient. And it's going to be interesting to see how Beijing responds to this. I think it's good news, but I also think people shouldn't be overly optimistic that this is Hong Kong out of the woods in terms of the threat that Beijing poses to the territory. Just looking at the report here, this is from the I newspaper, dated the 26th of November 2019. Um, this is David against Goliath. Hurrah, tweeted one supporter of Jimmy Sham, a pro democracy candidate who was beaten by thugs with hammers before the election. Um, of course, the local council elections, these councils have limited power, but it's representative, if nothing else, and I think it's a morale boost for the protest movement. Um, I think any notion that the violent aspects of the protests have turned wider Hong Kong society against the democracy movement would prove to be unfounded because clearly there is an endorsement of democracy. I do think, though, that the violent aspects of the protesters, they really need to also take responsibility now. Well, I mean, it's just, I'm not going to condone that. But I think that this is very significant. I mean, I think it's a sort of situation whereby, in normal circumstances, it wouldn't be that relevant because these councils don't have that much political power. But I think as a mandate, as a message being sent to Beijing is very important, and certainly the young people that I've seen from Hong Kong have responded positively to this. Um, so yeah, it'll just be interesting to see how Beijing responds. Um, what happens now? I think the movement would be right to gain on the momentum to keep pushing for the demands. Although I would say the demand that there is, I think the demands are very reasonable. For example, full democracy and an independent inquiry into police brutality. But one of the demands now is problematic, and I hate saying this, but the demand that everyone charged be exonerated. Unfortunately, there has been some examples of violence, like the people who set the guy on fire. That's a criminal act. It's wrong, and I can't see a situation where the people who done that are going to be exonerated. But the vast majority of protesters in this movement have been peaceful. This is a rebuke. This is a rebuke to CGTN's lies. It's a rebuke to Xinhua's lies. It's a rebuke to Global Times lies. And it's a rebuke to the thuggish nature of the Chinese Communist regime. Um, I mean, what's Beijing going to do? They can't just send tanks in when the whole world's watching. Because unlike 1989, we have social media, there's 24-hour news. I don't think they're going to do that. But I also think it's important not to be complacent because if there's one thing China hates, it's losing face. And this is embarrassing for China. Um, so that's a dangerous combination of the sort of sensitivity of Chinese embarrassment combined with the power of China. That is a dangerous thing. Um, this is coming on top of reports coming out of Xinjiang, which are horrendous. You know, it may actually be the biggest incarceration of minority people since the Holocaust. No other way to put it. Um, there have been many atrocities since then, but this, what is happening in Xinjiang, I'll be making a whole other video about that. But that really, Hong Kong is like the gateway, the kind of icing on the cake. It's representative, but Xinjiang is the true hell of what Chinese communism represents. Um, anyway, I'll round it up there. It's good news. This should be welcomed, but I think it's a good time for the movement to capitalize on this, but has to do it sensibly. So the disruption needs to stop now. You know, running battles with the police and so on, that needs to stop because I think that would not go down well. Um, I don't think that would help the movement. So I think the protesters themselves also need to stand back a little bit. Yes, gain on the momentum here, but don't, you know, they need to not go down that approach of continuing these violent protests. And the leaders need to distance themselves from those who are involved in it because it's damaging the movement, in my opinion. And I'm saying this as someone who supports the movement 120% because, you know, when it comes to communism versus democracy, I will always, always, always side with democracy every time. So, incidentally, in case I don't mention in the other video, the official responsible for the Xinjiang incarcerations, Zhu Hailun, has been named. This sounds like a very dangerous individual. He speaks fluent Uyghur to the point many Han officials have confused him for being a Uyghur. He is Han Chinese, but this is definitely someone that, for example, we can impose a sort of British version of the Magnitsky Act on. Um, I mean, we really need to be taking those sort of steps. And in Australia, there is reports that a man who was recently found dead in Melbourne was being planted as a candidate in Australia, serving the Communist Party, and he kind of came out and admitted he was a spy. Then he was mysteriously found dead. It sounds very much like the sort of murky things that Russia has done in this country. We need to stand with the Australians, and it is just yet another reminder of the power of the Chinese state. There is a lot of things going on here. CGTN operating in the UK, the Xinjiang camps, the situation in Hong Kong, and sort of underhand tactics China is using around the world, in democracies in particular. We need to get assertive and we need to stand up to Beijing.